The story about Jesus' conversation with the Samaritan woman at the well has so many layers of social and geopolitical intrigue. It's got history, it's got geography, it's got social interactions. It is a fantastic story and one that has been told many, many times. I invite you to come along. We're going to dig into some of the history and the geography, as well as the social implications of a Jewish man speaking with a Samaritan woman.
Just a quick show of hands so I know the environment to which I am preaching. Who here love history? Show of hands. Oh, that's good. That's exciting. That's better than I expected. I'm really excited about that. I will have to admit something to you. When I was younger, I had no time for history. That did not interest me. I would kind of just skate by and get the marks I needed just to get through. And it was great because my mother wasn't the biggest fan of history either. Sorry, Mom, she's probably watching and I shouldn't be telling people that, but that's okay. She would kind of let me off easy because the numbers just wouldn't stick in her head, and I was kind of the same way. And it was all about dates and who did what at what time, and just couldn't get me interested. But then, as I aged a little bit, I realized that it wasn't actually the history that I didn't like. It's the fact that it didn't matter at all to me. That was what I didn't like. Once there was a topic that I was very interested in, then the history that went along with it became interesting too. I mean, this isn't rocket science. This is not shocking to any of you that a thing you're interested in means that the other stuff is interesting too. For example, when I was in school and we were learning about the Second World War, didn't really matter to me. But my grandfather was involved in the Second World War, and he was actually on planes, and so I developed a love of planes. So then once I knew that this particular plane flew from this particular area in this particular time frame, then it mattered whose side that was on and what was going on that time during the war. It mattered. The numbers made sense. I cared again. When I was a kid, all this history, and some of you probably land there too. We dig through, 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings, these deep historical stories, and it's this people fighting those people, and it's when this guy was the king of that spot, and it's just heavy. It's just a lot. I'm going to apologize for those of you who don't care for history, because we're going to nerd out on history for a minute because it suddenly matters. So that beautiful story about Jesus and the Samaritan woman, if we don't know at least a little bit of the history, it's a lovely story, but it gets deep. And I'm not even using a well as a pun, but it gets deep right away as soon as you know a little bit of the history. Now, of course, there's some geography that goes with history too. So if you like history but don't like geography, bear with me for 1 second. We've got a map that I think should help us out a little bit here. Maybe? Woohoo! It's a little bit squishy, but that's okay. So this is, obviously, we've got Jerusalem at the bottom. This kind of rough area is the space that is known as the Kingdom of Israel in different times and different places. Now, some of it is also the Kingdom of Judah, and some of it is the Kingdom of Israel. Do we remember that there were 12 tribes at one time? We go way, way back. They came out of Egypt. There are 12 tribes. They settled in this area. This is the Promised Land. I'm doing a really, really ripping through the entire Old Testament sort of version here. But this matters because all of the people at the northern bit would need to come to the southern bit to visit Jerusalem, especially for some of their celebrations. But right in the middle there is Samaria, Mount Ebal, Mount Gerizim, and the Jews and the Samaritans did not like each other. In fact, that matters so much that the writer of John put that in brackets right here, is that they had very little in common, which is hilarious in itself because the writer is actually making a political commentary that we would easily miss out because the Jews and the Samaritans used to be the same people. That was all them. But then years went by and things changed. Now, they didn't always succeed politically or militarily. And we have stories about the Persians coming in and wiping out this group of them, and the Assyrians wiping out that group of them. I'm not going to bother with the dates. It doesn't matter much. But what does matter is we're talking about, like, there's 100 years between the Assyrians and the Persians, and then there's another 100 years over here. So we're talking in Jesus' day, the Samaritans and the Jews have been at odds for about 500 years. Let that sink in for a minute, because there's still animosity between British and Germans today. That's a thing. We're only a couple of generations. We're coming up on 100 years. This is 500 years. This is deep-seated. We do not talk to those Samaritans. We don't even bother to think about why. We don't even bother to get into the fact that the reason that the Jews and the Samaritans don't like each other, it actually is relatively simple, because the Samaritans had the nerve to intermarry. Yep, that's what it is. They're mad because they married other people. Can it be that simple? So there was this large group that got deported out. Other people came in and wiped out and destroyed all of the country and took people away. Well, the folks who were left, they had nothing. Their cities were burned. Their fields were burned. Their people were dead. They had nobody protect them, and all they could do was just survive. And in the process, they wound up saying, oh, there are some other small groups around who are also really, really struggling. We should work together. And that grew into relationships, and that grew into intermarrying, and they are the Samaritans. And then, several hundred years later, different times, different places, we have the pure Jews, as they would think of themselves, coming back. You're the bad guys because you intermarried. It probably wasn't all that bad to begin with, but 500 years later, this is trouble. To the point even, and this is where the political commentary comes in, that the writer of John, who's writing about 90 or 100 years after Jesus, it still is so deep-seated, he has to write the words, they had nothing in common. Which is a lie. They come from the same people. They used to worship the same God. And in fact, in this conversation, the whole temple thing comes into it, because we've got Mount Gerizim there. So the Samaritans built a temple on Mount Gerizim. But the rest of the Jewish people are like, no, the proper temple is in Jerusalem. And if you're not worshiping in Jerusalem, then you're not worshiping right. I'm glad that we as humans have come so much further than that. None of us have ever heard anything around, well, if you don't worship in my church, then you're not worshiping right. Right? We've gone past this, haven't we? We as humans are thankfully better than this. So maybe this, in fact, is a story about all humanity, not about Jews and Samaritans. Whew. There's the history. But we really, really needed that so we could understand the depth of meaning that Jesus intentionally brought into this conversation. First off, by actually going to Samaria. So you can see that there's a couple of dotted lines on here. The green goes around one side, the red goes around the other, and the white, which you can barely see, goes straight down the middle. These are the common routes that people from the northern kingdom would travel to get to Jerusalem. And the green and the red, those are the ones you take. They take days and days longer, but you don't take the white way because that takes you through the Samaritans, and we don't speak to the Samaritans. But Jesus had the nerve to just walk right in. And he sat down at a well. Very clear that this was Jacob's well. Very clear to point out that this is common history of all of them. We remember who Jacob was. We remember that story. We consider Jacob one of our ancestors too, at least religious-wise. He sat down at a well. It was about noon, and a woman was coming to collect water. Oh, okay, so we're not done with the history yet. A little bit of social economical history. You don't draw water at noon because it's bloody hot. Do we remember where this is? This is the Middle East. Anybody have any desire to stand outside under the hot, scorching sun at noontime? No. The women come in the morning and gather whatever water they would need, and they come in a large group because this well is deep and it's a long ways down, and it's not an easy task, so they would work together. Or perhaps they would come as women and men. We don't really know all of those details, but what we do know is if you're coming at noon, there's a reason. There's a good chance that she was an outcast from her own people. That's not the only answer. That's one thing that scholars kind of argue around. But there's a good chance that if she is drawing water at noon, it's because she couldn't come when everybody else came. So we're going to sit with that for a minute. We have Jesus, a Jew, a man, a scholar. He's a rabbi. He's already at like some level of privilege within his own people, sitting and speaking with a woman who is possibly an outcast of her own people, and her people are the outcasts of the Jewish people, and he's in a city that he probably shouldn't be in anyhow because everybody else just goes around because it's better than having to deal with those dirty Samaritans. And he strikes up a conversation with her. We have to understand how completely upsetting this story is. Nobody does this. Like, so much nobody does this that red line and the green line, there are still paths. Those are roads today because of all the people that walked to go around Samaria. Jesus shows up and starts a conversation with her. He had, in that circumstance, all the power. He was the equivalent in this moment, in that little moment, he had the privilege that would equate today to an old, white, English-speaking, educated male. Just to put it in some context. He could say and do pretty much anything. Now, don't get me wrong. He gets to Jerusalem and that power balance changes entirely. But where he sits on the edge of that well, in the hot sun beating down, he has all of the social power in that conversation. And he just strikes up a chat with the person that he shouldn't speak to. Now, we are maybe less shocked by that because we know the rest of his story. We've read some of the other parts of this book. He did that. That was his way. That was his thing. And we even notice that although this is early in his ministry, even when the disciples showed up, do you see that nobody was like, "The heck are you doing?" I'm sure they were like, "Oh, Jesus, he's at it again." They were kind of used to this. But the reason that this story still sits with us today, that we still need to dig deep into the depth of this story, is to recognize just how he was taking every single element of what goes on in society and turning it over and saying, "Do you not understand that this is nuts?" And with this story, he is calling out every single old, white, male, English-speaking, educated, anybody who has power. Actually, we can roll that back. Let's just start with white. Let's just start with English-speaking. Let's just start with wealth or education. He's calling us out. Like, in a pretty directed way. But because it's Jesus, he doesn't bother to point fingers at any one of us. That's not his way. He just gets down to the business of caring for a human who's a human, who maybe doesn't always feel like a human because she's got to go to the well in the heat of the day when nobody else is there to help her with water. And when he treats her like a human, everything changes. Everything changes. It changes her. And then she runs back to her people. And the change in her is so significant that they believe her. Remember, this is the woman who had to go in the middle of the day because she was not respected, maybe because of the husband thing. We don't really know. But she was already an outcast. And when she showed up in the town and said, "So there's this Jewish guy, and you got to come talk to him." You have to hear what he has to say. If we don't spend the time digging into all of this history and all of this geography, we don't get the levels. There's this Jewish guy that you've got to hear. And because they believed her, they came to see him. Because he treated her like she was a person. He saw her for who she was. Yep, she has flaws. Absolutely. Even the flaws that he pointed out, he didn't point out in an accusatory way. He just said, "You have spoken the truth." He accepted her for exactly who she was. Treated her with respect. Treated her with love. And offered her living water. Now, I love that even the writer of John is holding that in a little bit of, not quite sarcasm, but we do see that she doesn't get the whole story. Now, let's be honest. As soon as it gets into the murky territory of Holy Spirit and holy living water, I don't always totally wrap my head around it either. She's just heard about this for the first time. Let's cut her a bit of a break on that one. But it changes everything. So what do we do with this today? I mean, it helps us to know a little bit more about 500 years of animosity between people who were once family, that Jesus, through one conversation, started to unwind all of that, at least in a little space, in a little time, for a small group of people. And we do know that today there are Samaritans who live in Sychar. It's got a different name now that I've forgotten, but that's okay. They still know where that well was. They still know that that was their connection to the time that Jesus came to visit their people. Now, I'm not claiming that any of us can be Jesus. That's not the goal here. But what we can do is we can take a look at the layers of social power that he just peeled back in one fell swoop because he treated a human as if she was a human. All of us here have social power, each in our own way. It's different for all of us, and it takes a bit of work to really see that. I've heard it compared to asking a fish what water is. The power and privilege that we all have, we don't always know it because what we're used to. It's where we live. It's the environment around us. It's the air we breathe. It is who we are. It takes work to be aware of that. I think that's one of the most incredible parts of Jesus' story is he knew. He knew who he was, and he knew how he could use the little bits of power that he had to totally change everything. And in that way, we are exactly the same. Just imagine if we chose to treat everybody like they were humans. Now that seems obvious. But we in a Western society, we in an industrialized world, we in the depths of capitalism, we do a very, very good job. Our entire society does a good job of moving the people we don't want to treat like people to a space where we don't have to sit beside them in the hot sun at the edge of a well. It doesn't take a lot of thinking to wonder, what about the things we're eating, the things we're wearing, the cars we're driving, the places we are? Who made them? Are they treated like humans? It doesn't take many minutes of looking at any piece of media to realize that there are many, many humans throughout this world who do not get treated like humans. They don't even have water to drink, let alone living water. This is the hardest part. I sit here with the passion of knowing that each and every one of us can do and be just as impactful as Jesus, sitting on the edge of a well in a city that he shouldn't have been in, speaking to a woman that he shouldn't have spoken to, and treating her like she was just the same as every other human on this planet. I know that we can. I'm just not certain how. So that's my challenge to each and every one of us. How do we do this? How do we right the ship? How do we redirect an entire society that is built on some people being lower and some people being higher? How do we meet people where they are, treat them like humans, and give them living water? I wish that part was as easy as going through the history and the geography and reading these words. I guess we're going to have to turn to God to ask for help, to ask for open eyes, to ask for gentle reminders in the times where it's easier to just take the red route and go around Samaria. It's easier just to say, I'm a man, you're a woman, I don't need to talk to you. It's easier just to say, I'm a Jew, you're a Samaritan, and we do not cross paths. It's easier to say, I'm a Canadian, I live in luxury, I'd rather not know the rest. May God lead us each gently into the living water that we need to drink so that the whole world can drink. Amen.
Thank you so much for watching this week's sermon. If you want to see some of the previous ones, I'll put a list up over there and you can see previous sermons that we've uploaded to YouTube. I love you all. I'll see you soon. Bye for now.